Amy walked beside the snake, her heart pounding as they moved through the dimly lit corridors of the Villain League's headquarters. The walls were cold and bare, and the air carried a palpable sense of menace. She had stepped into a world that was far removed from the bureaucratic power struggles of the school district. This was something darker, something more dangerous. And yet, she felt a thrill coursing through her veins. She had crossed the line, and she wasn't going to turn back. The snake glanced at her as they walked, a slight smirk on his lips. The snake. If you want to join us, Amy, it's not just a matter of saying the words. The Villain League doesn't let just anyone in. You'll need approval from someone far more powerful than me. Amy kept her composure, though the tension in her gut grew. Amy. Who? The Snake Plasma Man. He's the real leader here, the one who decides who's worthy of joining. You've heard of him, I assume? Amy nodded, her throat tightening. Plasma Man. The name alone sent a chill through her. He was a legend, not just in the villain world but also to the Hero League, Carl's brother, the one who nearly destroyed Northern Europe. She knew of him all too well, and if she was going to make her place here, she would need his approval. The snake. He's not easily impressed, but if you can convince him that you're serious about this, about taking down the Hero League, you might just get what you want. Amy swallowed her nerves and nodded. Amy, I'm ready. The snake chuckled softly. The snake. We'll see. With that he pushed open the door, the heavy metal creaking as it revealed a large, shadowy room. The air inside was thick with an almost electric energy. Plasma Man's presence was palpable, even before Amy laid eyes on him. The snake gestured for her to enter. The snake. Good luck. Amy stepped inside, her breath catching as she saw him. Plasma Man stood at the far end of the room, his back turned to her. His body seemed to shimmer, faint waves of heat radiating from him, distorting the air around him. He wore a dark, sleek suit, but what stood out most was the unnatural glow that surrounded him, the power that had made him infamous. Slowly, Plasma Man turned to face her. His eyes glowed faintly, as if he were holding back an immense, destructive force. He studied her for a moment, the weight of his gaze almost unbearable. Then in a low, calm voice he spoke. Plasma Man. So, this is the one who wants to join the Villain League? Amy's heart raced, but she stood her ground. Amy? I am! Plasma Man stepped closer, his movement smooth and deliberate. Plasma Man. And why should I care about you? What makes you think you're worthy to stand among us? Amy straightened, summoning every ounce of confidence she had. Amy, because I know the Hero League, I know their weaknesses. I've been inside their organization, I've fought against them, and I've seen what they can do. I've also seen how they can be brought down. Plasma Man's eyes narrowed, his expression unreadable. Plasma Man. You think you can destroy them, Amy? I know I can. I tried to do it the right way. I used the law, the system, but it wasn't enough. Now I'm ready to do whatever it takes. I want revenge, and I'm willing to cross any line to get it. For a moment, Plasma Man said nothing, simply watching her. The tension in the room was suffocating, but Amy refused to back down. She had come too far to give up now. Finally, Plasma Man smiled, though it wasn't a warm smile, it was cold, calculating. Plasma Man. Revenge is a powerful motivator, and the Hero League is long overdue for a reckoning. He stepped closer to her, the heat from his body intensifying as he loomed over her. Plasma Man. But understand this, Amy. Once you join us, there's no going back. If you fail, the Hero League won't be your only enemy. We don't tolerate weakness or betrayal in the Villain League. Amy met his gaze, her voice steady. Amy, I won't fail. Plasma Man stared at her for a long moment before finally nodding. Plasma Man. Then welcome to the Villain League. Let's see if you can live up to your ambitions. With that, he turned away, his presence still radiating an intense, almost suffocating power. The snake, standing by the door, gave Amy a nod of approval as he gestured for her to leave the room. Amy turned and followed the snake out, her heart still pounding but her resolve stronger than ever. She had made it. She was now part of the Villain League, and this time, she was determined to bring the Hero League to its knees. Colton and Mr. Rence stepped out of the truck and made their way through the quiet hallways of Hero League headquarters. The tension from their failed mission still hung heavily between them as they climbed the stairs toward Connor's office. The air was thick with a sense of unease. Amy had disappeared, and the last thing they needed was for her to have more time to plot against them. As they reached Connor's office, Colton knocked on the door, and after a brief moment, they heard Connor's familiar voice from inside. Connor, OS, come in! The two heroes stepped inside, finding Connor standing behind his desk, clearly waiting for news. His brow furrowed slightly as he saw the expressions on their faces. Connor, well? What happened? Mr. Rence sighed, stepping forward. Mr. Rence, she's gone, Connor. We went to her office, checked everything, but the place was empty. No sign of her anywhere. Colton added. Colton. The room was dark, no papers out of place like she'd left in a hurry. It looked almost like she was planning to disappear. We have no idea where she could have gone. Connor's jaw clenched as he leaned back against his desk, processing the information. Connor, this isn't good. Amy's not the type to run without a plan. If she's gone, that means she's up to something. Something big. Mr. Rence frowned, frustration evident on his face. Mr. Rence. We were ready to arrest her. We had everything set, but she slipped right through our fingers. Connor stood silently for a moment, his mind racing through possibilities. He finally shook his head and let out a deep breath. Connor, we can't let this slip-up shake us. She's dangerous, and she's already proven she'll do anything to bring us down. Colton leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Colton, so what now? Do we track her down? If she's planning something, we can't wait until she makes her next move. Connor nodded, his gaze hardening. Connor, you're right. We need to find her, and fast. If she's gone underground, we might have to assume she's not working alone anymore. If she's not in the system, then there's only one place she could be. Mr. Rence's eyes narrowed. Mr. Rence. The Villain League. Connor sighed, confirming their suspicions. Connor, it's the only thing that makes sense. If she's joined forces with them, then we're in for a serious fight. Plasma Man has been quiet for too long, and if Amy's aligned with him, we're in more trouble than we thought. Colton straightened up. Colton, so what's the plan? We can't just wait for her to attack. Connor pushed off the desk and walked to the large window overlooking the city. Connor, we don't wait. We find out what she's up to and stop her before she can make her move, but it won't be easy. The Villain League has their ways of staying hidden. If she's there, she'll be protected. Mr. Rence clenched his fists. Mr. Rence, I should have known she'd go this far. All that talk about using the system. Now she's thrown it all away to become a full-on villain. Connor turned back to face them. Connor, the Villain League will be a lot harder to deal with than the law ever was. We're going to need everyone on board for this, and we can't go in blind. First, we need intel. Find out exactly what Amy's up to, where she's hiding, and what she's planning with Plasma Man. Colton nodded, determination etched on his face. Colton, we'll figure it out. We've beaten worse. Connor gave a slight smile. Connor, I know you will. This is just another fight, but it's one we can't afford to lose. Amy's proven that she's willing to do whatever it takes. We'll need to be smarter and faster than she expects. Mr. Rence met Connor's gaze. Mr. Rence, she thinks she's beaten us, but we're not done yet. Connor nodded, his expression resolute. Connor, you're right, we're not done. Now let's start putting the pieces together. With that, the group left Connor's office, their minds racing with the gravity of the situation. Amy had joined the Villain League, and they would need to stop her before she could strike. The stakes had never been higher, but the Hero League wasn't about to back down. The battle was far from over. At the Villain League headquarters, the air buzzed with tension as Amy followed Plasma Man deeper into the dimly lit corridors. The further they walked, the more Amy could feel the undercurrent of raw, unrestrained power that flowed through the place. It was a far cry from her old life, but she welcomed it. She was ready for something more, something that would give her the strength to finally bring down the Hero League. Plasma Man led her into a large, high-tech chamber. The walls were lined with dark metal, and in the center of the room stood a massive, ominous-looking machine. The device hummed with energy, its coils and wires pulsing with a faint glow. Plasma Man stopped in front of it and turned to face her, a smirk playing on his lips. Plasma Man, this is what separates the real villains from the wannabes. If you want to be one of us, Amy, you'll need more than just brains and ambition. You need something super, a real power. Amy's eyes widened as she stared at the machine. Amy, what? What does it do? Plasma Man chuckled darkly, stepping closer to the device. Plasma Man, it's our latest creation. It gives people superpowers. You step inside and if you survive the process, you come out changed. Stronger, faster, more dangerous. Amy hesitated for only a moment, but the hunger for power and the thirst for revenge quickly drowned out any doubt. Amy, I'm ready. I'll do whatever it takes. Plasma Man raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed by her determination. Plasma Man, brave words. But trust me, Amy, the process is excruciating. Most can't handle it. If you think you're tough enough to handle it, then step inside. Without another word, Amy moved toward the machine. The chamber door slid open with a hiss, revealing the dark, foreboding interior. She stepped inside, her heart pounding, but her mind set on what was to come. She had no choice but to embrace this if she wanted to truly defeat the Hero League. As soon as she was fully inside, the door sealed shut with a deafening clang. Plasma Man's voice crackled through a speaker inside the chamber. "Plasma Man, VO. This is it, Amy. Let's see if you survive the birth of your powers." Suddenly, the machine roared to life. The walls of the chamber glowed as arcs of energy crackled and surged around her, wrapping her body in searing heat. Amy gasped, pain ripping through her as she felt the energy digging into her very cells, her bones aching as if they were being pulled apart. Her skin tingled and her muscles screamed as though they were being torn apart and rebuilt at the same time. The pain was unbearable, far worse than she had ever imagined. Every nerve in her body felt like it was on fire and she wanted to scream, but she gritted her teeth, refusing to give in. She couldn't show weakness, not now. Not when she was so close to what she wanted. The machine whirred louder, the energy intensifying until it felt like her body was being torn in two. And then, as suddenly as it began, it was over. The machine powered down, the glowing lights fading, and Amy collapsed to the floor of the chamber, gasping for breath. The door slid open and Plasma Man stood there, arms crossed, watching her with a smirk. "Plasma Man, well, you survived, I'm impressed." Amy slowly pushed herself to her feet, still shaky from the ordeal. "Amy, what happened? Did it work?" Plasma Man chuckled, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Plasma Man? Oh, it worked. You've got powers now. Go on, see for yourself." Amy closed her eyes and focused, trying to sense what had changed. She felt a strange surge of energy coursing through her, and when she opened her eyes her hands began to glow faintly. She could feel it, the ability to manipulate power itself. She concentrated, and with a flick of her fingers, the lights in the room dimmed, then flared to life again. Plasma Man watched her demonstration, his smirk growing wider. "Plasma Man, control over power, huh? You can manipulate energy, electricity, maybe even draw power from different sources. Not bad." Amy felt a spark of hope. "Amy, so it worked? I have real power now?" But Plasma Man's smirk turned into a mocking grin as he leaned in closer. Plasma Man, "Oh, it worked all right, but let's be real, Amy. Controlling power? How dull. You got the most basic, unimaginative power possible. What are you gonna do? Turn the lights off when the Hero League comes after you?" Amy's face fell as she registered his tone. "Amy, what do you mean? This power can be..." "Plasma Man. Useful? Sure, maybe. But in the grand scheme of things it's laughable. You're no Plasma Man, Amy. And you never will be. Controlling energy? It's like a child's first science experiment. I thought you'd get something more impressive." He shook his head, clearly entertained by the situation. Amy clenched her fists, the energy crackling around her hands. "Amy, I'll show you what I can do. I'll make this power into something that can destroy the Hero League." Plasma Man shrugged, still smiling. "Plasma Man, we'll see. Just don't get in my way, alright? There's only room for one real powerhouse around here." He turned and walked out of the room, leaving Amy standing alone, her new power crackling in her hands. Her muscles still ached from the painful process, but the fire inside her burned stronger than ever. Plasma Man might mock her now, but he didn't know how determined she was. She would prove him wrong. She would make this power into something terrifying, and when the time came, the Hero League would fall. Amy stood alone in the dimly lit chamber, frustration bubbling just beneath the surface. Her hands still tingled from the energy she had manipulated earlier, and she closed her eyes, concentrating once more. She tried to summon the same surge of power she'd felt before, hoping to tap into the electric energy she had controlled moments ago. She focused hard, but instead of the familiar crackling of energy, something strange happened. Her eyes snapped open as she saw the papers scattered across the floor of the room start to flutter. Confusion washed over her as the sheets of paper lifted off the ground, swirling in the air around her as though caught in an invisible breeze. She waved her hands instinctively, and the papers obeyed, swirling faster, following her movements. For a moment she froze, staring in disbelief at the papers floating in front of her. "Amy, what the hell?" Amy clenched her fists, trying to redirect her focus back to controlling power. Electricity, energy, something real. But no matter how hard she tried, the only thing that responded was the paper. She waved her hand again, and a stack of papers on the desk flew toward her, swirling in chaotic loops before falling uselessly to the floor. "Amy, this can't be happening!" She focused harder, trying to draw energy from the lights or any other power source in the room, but the effort was futile. The electric charge she had felt before was gone, replaced by the laughable ability to control paper. Amy stood still, dumbfounded. Paper. Of all things, she was now stuck with the power to manipulate paper. She raised her hands and the paper scattered around her fluttered again, twisting and folding as if she was puppeteering them. She glared at the sheets, her frustration mounting. "Amy, are you kidding me? What am I supposed to do with this?" She waved her hands again, the papers folding themselves into crude shapes. Paper planes, boxes, meaningless scraps flying aimlessly around the room. Amy scowled. This was a joke. She'd gone through the most excruciating pain imaginable, stepped into a machine that was supposed to give her the power to bring the Hero League down, and this was what she got, the ability to control paper? "Amy, what the hell am I supposed to do with paper?" she yelled, throwing her hands up. The papers followed her movement, scattering and floating around the room, uselessly drifting to the ground. She growled in frustration, slamming her fist into the wall. But even as she did so, the papers rose again, as though mocking her. "Amy, this is stupid! I didn't go through all of this just to become the queen of paper!" She tried again, desperately trying to reach for the electric energy she'd felt before. She extended her hand toward the lights, concentrating as hard as she could. But nothing happened. The energy was gone and she was left with this ridiculous, useless power. Her chest tightened with frustration, and for a moment she felt the weight of the situation crash down on her. She had risked everything, only to end up with something so absurd. In the back of her mind she could almost hear Plasma Man's mocking voice. Controlling energy? Sure, maybe. But in the grand scheme of things, it's laughable. She could almost hear him laughing now, knowing that the energy she thought she had was just a fleeting moment before she was saddled with this. "Amy, paper? I can't do anything with paper." She tried folding them, shaping them, but it only served to make her angrier. She thought about tearing the papers apart, but they twisted back together in response to her anger as if they were taunting her. Her fists clenched, her face flushed with humiliation. "Amy, this is a joke, this has to be a joke." But deep down Amy knew it wasn't. She was stuck with this power, this utterly useless, ridiculous power. And no matter how much she hated it, she was going to have to figure out a way to make it work. Because if Plasma Man, the Snake, and the rest of the Villain League found out just how limited her new ability really was, she'd never hear the end of it. Amy stood there, breathing hard, surrounded by swirling paper. "Amy, I'll figure something out. There has to be a way to make this work." But even as she said the words, a small part of her wondered how in the world she was going to pull it off. Amy stormed down the dimly lit hallway, her frustration boiling over as she made her way to Plasma Man's office. She could still feel the fluttering sensation in her fingers, the paper lingering in her wake as if mocking her. She clenched her fists, determined to confront him. There was no way this could be real. She had endured so much to gain power, only to be cursed with something as ridiculous as controlling paper. When she reached Plasma Man's office, she didn't bother knocking. She slammed the door open, the sound reverberating through the room. Plasma Man was sitting at his desk, his feet propped up on the edge, and his glowing eyes glanced up lazily at her entrance. Plasma Man. Well, well. To what do I owe the pleasure, Amy? Amy crossed the room in a few quick strides, her anger radiating off her. "Amy, I need answers. You said that machine would give me power. Real power. I felt it for a moment, but now, all I can do is control paper." Plasma Man's smirk widened as he leaned back, his interest piqued. Plasma Man. "Ah, so the real power has revealed itself, has it? Amy, what do you mean? What happened to the electricity, the energy? I could feel it, and now it's just gone." Plasma Man waved a hand dismissively as though the answer were obvious. Plasma Man. Everyone who steps into that machine experiences the same thing at first. Control over power. It's always the initial reaction, something raw, something basic. But that's never the real power, Amy. It fades, and then the true ability surfaces. That's what's happened to you. Amy stared at him, a sinking feeling in her gut. "Amy, so this paper thing? That's my real power?" Plasma Man's grin only grew as he sat up, clearly enjoying her discomfort. Plasma Man. "Oh, that is what you got, is it? You can control paper? I have to admit, that's the most ridiculous superpower that machine has produced yet." Amy's face flushed with anger and humiliation. "Amy, I don't understand. I was supposed to be stronger. I was supposed to be able to take down the Hero League with real power, and instead I get this useless ability?" Plasma Man laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the room. "Plasma Man, paper? That's what you got? You're telling me you can fold origami, make paper cranes, and maybe throw a few paper cuts their way? Oh, this is rich! You came here looking for revenge, and this is what you've got to work with? Paper?" Amy clenched her fists, trying to keep her composure as the papers in the room began to stir, lifting and swirling around her. "Amy, it's not just paper. There has to be more to it. I'll find a way to make it useful." But Plasma Man only continued to laugh, shaking his head in disbelief. "Plasma Man, good luck with that, Amy. Honestly, I've seen some weird powers come out of that machine, but this takes the cake. I can't wait to see how you explain this to the rest of the league. Paper. You're going to fight the Hero League with paper." He walked around his desk, circling her like a predator circling its prey. "Plasma Man, face it, Amy, you're stuck with it. You wanted power, and the machine gave you what it thought you deserved. Maybe you're just not cut out for the kind of power you were hoping for." Amy's eyes blazed with fury, and the papers floating around her twisted and folded violently, but it only made Plasma Man laugh harder. "Plasma Man, look at you! So angry, yet all you can do is make the paper dance. Go ahead, try to stop me. Throw a paper airplane at me. See how far it gets you." Amy glared at him, seething with rage, but deep down she knew he was right. This power, this ability to control paper, was utterly useless compared to what she had hoped for. She wanted to destroy the Hero League, to bring them to their knees, but with this power, she'd be a joke. Plasma Man finally stopped laughing, wiping a tear from his eye as he turned serious once more. "Plasma Man, here's the thing, Amy. You're in the Villain League now, and we don't tolerate weakness. If you want to stay here, you better find a way to make that ridiculous power work. Because if you don't, well, let's just say the Villain League doesn't have room for failures." Amy stood there trembling with a mix of rage and humiliation. Plasma Man's words cut deep, but she refused to give up. She wouldn't let him win, and she wouldn't let the Hero League continue to mock her. She had made a choice to cross over to this world, and now she was determined to make the best of it, even if it meant turning the most ridiculous power into something deadly. "Amy, I'll make it work. I'll find a way." Plasma Man gave a final smirk, clearly amused. "Plasma Man, we'll see, Amy, we'll see." With that, he turned his back on her and returned to his desk, leaving her standing there in the swirling mess of paper, her mind racing with anger and determination. She had no choice now. She had to prove herself, to the Villain League and to herself. No matter how absurd her power seemed, she would find a way to turn it into something powerful. "Amy, VO. I'll make them all regret underestimating me," she thought, storming out of the office. Mrs. Jackson, one of the key players from the infamous Uno rematch, stood at the gates of Hero League headquarters, her hands trembling slightly. She had been part of Amy's team, loyal to her cause in the beginning, but now things had changed. After learning what Amy was truly planning, she knew she had to warn someone. She never imagined she'd be standing here about to enter the heart of the Hero League, a place that should have been off-limits to her.
"Can I help you?"
I need to speak to someone in charge. It's about Amy. I have information, important information.
"Amy, weren't you one of the ones who—"
I know, but things have changed. Please, you need to let me speak to someone. This is bigger than what you think.
"Wait here.
The guard turned, speaking into his communicator before opening the gates slightly.
Follow me."
Mrs. Jackson followed the guard into the towering structure of Hero League headquarters, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew this was risky, but she had no other choice. Amy had gone too far, and someone had to stop her before it was too late. After what felt like an eternity of winding through the halls, the guard stopped in front of a large, solid door.
"You'll be speaking with Connor, the commander of the Hero League. Good luck."
Mrs. Jackson nodded, taking a deep breath as the door opened. She stepped into the office where Connor stood behind his desk, his arms folded, his eyes sharp and questioning. Colton and Mr. Rence stood off to the side, clearly surprised to see her. "Connor, Mrs. Jackson, I didn't expect to see you here." "Mrs. Jackson, I'm here because I need to warn you about Amy." "Connor? Amy? Last I checked, you were on her side. Why are you telling us this now?" Mrs. Jackson glanced at Colton and Rence, their expressions a mix of confusion and curiosity. She turned back to Connor, determined to make him understand. "Mrs. Jackson, I was on her side at first. I believed in what she was trying to do, trying to hold you all accountable for the damage you've caused, but things have changed. She's gone too far." "Connor, what do you mean, gone too far?" "Mrs. Jackson, I spoke to her recently just after she disappeared. She's gone to the Villain League headquarters." This revelation hung in the air for a moment, tension crackling between them. Colton's fists clenched at his sides, and Mr. Rence stepped forward, his voice low. "Mr. Rence? She's working with the Villain League, Mrs. Jackson? Yes, she wants to get revenge, real revenge. She thinks the only way to do that now is by working with them. I didn't realize what she was planning at first. I thought she just wanted to expose the Hero League, to make people see the damage you've caused. But when she told me she was getting villains involved, I knew it had gone too far. Connor exchanged a glance with Colton and Mr. Rence before focusing back on Mrs. Jackson. Connor, why are you telling us this now? If you were on Amy's side, why turn on her? Mrs. Jackson. Because I didn't sign up for this. I wanted accountability, yes, but I'm not a villain. I didn't want to see people get hurt. When Amy told me she was willing to work with villains, I realized she's not thinking clearly anymore. She's obsessed with taking you down, and she doesn't care how far she has to go to do it. If she gets the Villain League involved, innocent people are going to get hurt. I can't be part of that, Connor. And what do you expect from us, Mrs. Jackson? You came here, risking a lot. What is it you want? Mrs. Jackson, I want to help stop her. I may have been on her side before, but not anymore. If she's working with the Villain League, she needs to be stopped. I'm telling you this because you're the only ones who can stop her. Colton, then we'll stop her. But we need to know where she is, what she's planning. Mrs. Jackson, I don't know all the details, but she's gone to the Villain League headquarters. She's trying to get Plasma Man and the others to help her take down the Hero League. She wants revenge at any cost. Connor let out a slow breath, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. Connor, Plasma Man, this isn't just a grudge anymore. If she's working with the Villain League, this could be a full-scale attack. Rence clenched his fists, anger simmering beneath his calm exterior. Mr. Rence, we can't let this happen. We need to move fast. Connor, we will. Mrs. Jackson, you did the right thing by coming here. If you have any more information, we'll need it. But for now, you're under our protection. Mrs. Jackson, thank you. I'll tell you anything I can to help. Connor, we'll need to gather the rest of the team and prepare. If Amy's working with the Villain League, this could be bigger than anything we've faced before. Colton, let's gear up. We can't waste any time. As they left Connor's office to prepare for what was to come, the gravity of the situation settled in. Amy had crossed a line, and now, with the Villain League behind her, she was more dangerous than ever. But the Hero League was ready. They had to be. There was no turning back now. Title, to be continued.
I told you not to underestimate me. You think paper's a joke? I'll make sure it's the last thing anyone laughs at.
So here we are again, Amy, still determined to make your paper powers something more than a schoolyard trick. Honestly, you might as well be a glorified secretary with that ability.
Amy stood in the training room of the Villain League headquarters, facing Plasma Man, with a storm of emotions roiling inside her. The weight of his ridicule still clung to her, fueling her frustration. She knew that the members of the Villain League saw her as a joke, especially with her paper manipulation power. Plasma Man, especially, seemed to delight in mocking her. But Amy was determined to prove them wrong. She had to. She would make her new ability dangerous, no matter how absurd it seemed.
Tell me, what's next? Are you going to throw a paper crane at me? Fold some origami to take down the Hero League? Maybe send a villainous memo?
The other villains in the room, watching from the sidelines, snickered at his words. Amy felt the weight of their eyes on her, but she refused to let it break her focus. She'd been training since the day she received her powers, and today she was ready to show Plasma Man and everyone else that she was more than just a joke. Taking a deep breath, Amy raised her hands. The papers scattered around the room lifted into the air, responding to her will. They fluttered gently at first, like harmless sheets caught in a breeze. But Amy's focus intensified, and the papers began to sharpen, their edges stiffening like blades.
Oh, come on, what are you—
He was cut off mid-sentence, quite literally. In one swift, controlled movement, Amy sent a flurry of paper sheets flying straight at him, their edges aimed with deadly precision. Plasma Man's smirk faltered for a split second as he attempted to dodge, but Amy was faster than he'd anticipated. One of the paper's sharp corners sliced across his forearm, leaving a deep, bloody gash. Plasma Man stopped, his glowing eyes widening in surprise as he looked down at the wound. Blood dripped from the cut, staining the floor below him. The room went silent as the villains who had been laughing moments ago now watched with growing interest. Plasma Man slowly turned his gaze back to Amy, his smile gone, replaced by something else. Respect? Curiosity?
Well, looks like there's more to you than I thought.
Amy's breathing was steady, her eyes locked on him, her focus unwavering.
I told you not to underestimate me. You think paper's a joke? I'll make sure it's the last thing anyone laughs at.
Plasma Man straightened, his mocking tone gone. He studied her for a moment, clearly re-evaluating his earlier judgment. He glanced at his bleeding arm and then back at Amy, a slow grin forming on his face. Not one of mockery, but one of genuine interest.
So, you've learned how to make it hurt. Maybe you aren't such a waste after all.
He gestured toward his wound, the blood still oozing from the deep paper cut.
I'll admit I didn't see that coming. Sharp enough to draw blood? You might be more dangerous than I gave you credit for.
The other villains, who had been silent, now watched with new interest, muttering amongst themselves. Amy felt a surge of satisfaction. She'd gotten their attention, and more importantly, she'd proven to Plasma Man that she was capable of more than he had imagined. Plasma Man stepped closer, his grin widening.
All right, Amy, I'll give you this. You've got potential, but this is only the beginning. If you want to stay in the Villain League, you'll need to do more than give me a little paper cut. You'll need to master this power, make it deadly. Can you do that?
I can, and I will.
Plasma Man chuckled, shaking his head.
Then let's see what you're really capable of. We'll give you more opportunities to prove yourself, but just know this. If you fail, we won't hesitate to cut you loose. Understood?
Understood?
Plasma Man turned and walked toward the exit, gesturing for the other villains to follow him.
Keep training, Amy. You might just survive around here after all.
As the others left the room, Amy stood alone. Surrounded by the floating papers she now knew could be her greatest weapon. She'd shown them a glimpse of what she could do, and from this point on, she would make sure they never doubted her again. She wasn't just a joke or a pawn in Amy's own revenge. She was something more. And with each passing day, her power would only grow stronger, sharper, more dangerous. Connor, Colton and Mr. Rence made their way down the familiar spiral staircase that led to the Hero League's man cave. The underground lair was a space where the team could relax, train and strategize in peace. As they descended, their footsteps echoed against the cool metal steps, and Colton couldn't help but feel the weight of what was coming. The news they had just learned from Mrs. Jackson was unsettling, and the rest of the team needed to be brought up to speed. When they reached the bottom, the door to the man cave slid open, revealing Zach, Chris, Mr. Dugan and Mr. Callaway lounging around. Zach was using his telekinesis to levitate small objects for practice. Chris was quietly reading a book while a few blades of grass danced between his fingers, and Mr. Dugan was sharpening his bladed fingers with a whetstone, as usual. Mr. Callaway stood by the wall, lost in thought, but clearly ready for anything. As soon as the trio entered the room, Zach looked up, noticing the serious expressions on their faces.
What's going on?
Chris raised an eyebrow, sensing something was wrong.
You guys look like you've seen a ghost.
Connor stepped forward, his face set in grim determination.
It's not a ghost, but it's close. We've just had a visit from Mrs. Jackson.
That got their attention. Mr. Dugan stopped sharpening his fingers, his cold, calculating eyes narrowing.
Mrs. Jackson? What's she doing here? Wasn't she with Amy's crew during that Uno rematch?
Colton nodded, crossing his arms.
Yeah, she was, but things have changed. She came to warn us about Amy.
Mr. Callaway stepped forward, frowning.
Warn us? Why would she do that?
Mr. Rence, who had been silent so far, spoke up.
Because Amy's not just playing games anymore. She's gone too far. She's run off to the Villain League headquarters and she's working with Plasma Man.
A murmur of disbelief ran through the group. Zach's eyes widened and Chris sat up straighter, putting his book aside.
She's working with the Villain League? But why? What does she want?
Connor, his voice serious, answered.
Revenge. She's lost her way, and now she's willing to do anything to take us down, including working with villains. According to Mrs. Jackson, Amy thinks the only way to get the justice she wants is by aligning herself with Plasma Man and the others. That's why she's gone to their headquarters.
Zach shook his head, his mind racing.
That's insane. We knew Amy had it out for us, but I didn't think she'd go this far.
Chris furrowed his brow, the grass between his fingers stiffening.
If she's joined forces with the Villain League, this isn't just about her grudge anymore. This is a full-blown threat. Plasma Man alone is dangerous, but if Amy's with him, she could use what she knows about us against us.
Mr. Dugan leaned back, his expression unreadable.
So what's the plan? We can't let her and Plasma Man have the upper hand.
Mr. Rence nodded.
That's exactly what we need to figure out. Mrs. Jackson warned us because she doesn't want to see anyone get hurt. She was with Amy at first, but she realized Amy's gone too far. She didn't sign up to help villains, and now she's on our side.
Mr. Callaway rubbed his chin thoughtfully.
If Amy's gone to the Villain League for help, then she's desperate. She feels like she's lost control, and that makes her dangerous. We need to act before they have a chance to put a plan in motion.
Connor nodded in agreement.
Exactly. Amy knows too much about us, and if she gives that information to Plasma Man, we could be in serious trouble. We'll need to find out where their headquarters is and stop them before they can strike.
Zack leaned forward, his eyes narrowing in thought.
We'll need intel first. We can't just charge in blind. Plasma Man's not the type to make it easy for us.
Mr. Dugan smirked, his fingers gleaming with the sharpness of freshly sharpened blades.
I don't mind a little chaos, but Zack's right. We need to know what we're up against.
Chris nodded in agreement.
I can help track down their location, but it's going to take time. The Villain League doesn't exactly leave breadcrumbs for us to follow.
Connor stepped forward, his voice filled with authority.
We've faced villains before, but this is different. Amy knows how we operate, and that gives her an edge. But we're not going to let her use that against us. We're going to stop her and the Villain League.
Colton looked at the group, his eyes blazing with determination.
Then let's do this. We're not going to let Amy take us down. We stop them now, before they have a chance to make their move.
The room fell silent as the weight of the situation settled in. They had fought battles before, faced villains with unimaginable powers, but this time it was personal. Amy had once been a thorn in their side, but now she had turned into something far more dangerous. Connor, ever the leader, glanced at each of them in turn.
We'll gather intel, form a plan, and hit them hard when the time is right. This isn't just about protecting the Hero League anymore. It's about stopping Amy before she does something she can't take back.
As they prepared to begin the next phase of their plan, the gravity of the situation settled in. The battle ahead wouldn't be easy, but the Hero League was ready. They had faced impossible odds before, and they would do it again. This time, it wasn't just about Amy's revenge. It was about the future of the Hero League itself. Amy paced back and forth in her quarters at Villain League headquarters, her mind racing as she tried to form a plan. She had been ridiculed for her paper powers, mocked by Plasma Man and the others, but now, after thinking about it, she realized something that might just turn the tide in her favor. The more she considered the ridiculousness of her power, the more she realized she could weaponize it in ways no one would expect.
Paper, it sounds stupid. Everyone thinks it's a joke. But if I use that perception to my advantage, I can catch them off guard. They'll never see it coming.
Amy paused, staring at a stack of papers in the corner. The papers twitched under her control, forming intricate shapes, folding themselves into blades and shuriken-like figures, sharper than they had any right to be. She smirked, feeling a surge of satisfaction. The more absurd, the better, she thought. They'll laugh at me, and that's when I'll strike. Her thoughts zeroed in on the Hero League. They were always so sure of themselves, always looking down on her. But more than any of them, her focus was on one person, Mr. Rence. He had been at the center of so much of her frustration. The Uno match, the escape from prison, he was always one step ahead. But now she had a chance to turn the tables.
I'll start with Mr. Rence. He'll never expect it. I'll create a mess of papers like no one's ever seen before. It'll look ridiculous, but that's the point. He'll underestimate it, and that's when I'll win. Confusion, chaos. While he's trying to figure it out, I'll strike.
The more she thought about it, the more confident she became. This could work. The absurdity of her power was its strength. No one would take it seriously until it was too late. She could turn harmless-looking papers into deadly weapons, cut through defenses and overwhelm them with sheer unpredictability. The Hero League, always so logical, wouldn't know how to respond. Amy clenched her fists, feeling the energy surging within her.
Paper can cut, paper can bind, paper can overwhelm. They'll see, they'll all see.
With her plan forming in her mind, Amy straightened up and took a deep breath. Now that she knew how to use her powers effectively, it was time to talk to Plasma Man. If she was going to attack the Hero League, she needed the Villain League on board, especially Plasma Man. As much as she despised his mockery, she knew he was the key to making this attack successful. She left her quarters and ascended the stairs, heading toward Plasma Man's private training room. Her footsteps echoed in the hallway as she approached the door. She steeled herself, ready to present her plan. When she entered, Plasma Man was standing in the center of the room, his back turned to her, energy radiating faintly from his body. Without looking at her, he spoke.
Back so soon, Amy? I thought you'd be licking your wounds after our little chat.
Amy forced herself to remain calm, her confidence growing with each step.
I figured it out. My power. I know how to use it now.
Plasma Man turned, his glowing eyes filled with amusement.
Oh, and how exactly are you going to use your paper powers to bring down the mighty Hero League? Going to send them an angry letter?
Amy stepped forward, her voice steady.
You've underestimated me. Everyone has. But that's exactly what I'm going to use against them.
Plasma Man raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued.
Go on.
Amy smirked, feeling the papers fluttering in her hands, waiting for her command.
No one takes paper seriously. It's ridiculous, absurd. But that's my advantage. I can overwhelm them with chaos, confusion. Imagine it, thousands of papers flying through the air, each one capable of cutting, binding, distracting. They'll think it's a joke, but while they're laughing, I'll be attacking. Mr. Rence especially. He'll never see it coming.
Plasma Man's eyes narrowed slightly, his interest piqued.
Confusion as a weapon?
Amy nodded.
Exactly. The ridiculousness of it will make them drop their guard. And when they do, I'll be ready to strike. Paper may seem harmless, but I can turn it into something deadly. They won't know how to defend against it. It'll be unlike anything they've faced.
Plasma Man studied her for a moment, his mocking tone gone, replaced by something more serious.
That is actually an interesting strategy. Unconventional, yes, but chaos can be powerful when used correctly.
Amy felt a surge of triumph. He was taking her seriously.
I can hit them where they least expect it. The Hero League won't be able to respond fast enough, and by the time they realize what's happening, it'll be too late.
Plasma Man smiled slowly, a wicked glint in his eyes.
I have to admit, Amy, I didn't expect you to come up with something so creative. You're right. No one will see it coming.
He stepped closer to her, his energy crackling faintly in the air.
Very well, I'll let you proceed with your plan. Show me what you can do. If it works, we'll have the upper hand against the Hero League.
Amy's heart raced, her confidence soaring. This was it, her chance to prove herself. She had a plan, and now, with the Villain League backing her, she was ready to strike.
Let's see if your little paper storm can tear the Hero League apart.
So anyone else think Toy Story 4 was a complete waste of time?
Absolutely. Toy Story 3 had the perfect ending. Andy going off to college, passing his toys on to Bonnie. How do you top that? Toy Story 4 felt like they just made it for a cash grab.
Exactly. They didn't need to make another one. I get it. They wanted to give Woody his own arc. But honestly, it felt like it ruined the closure we got with the third movie.
Yeah, I wasn't a fan either. The whole Forky storyline was weird, and I didn't need another emotional goodbye after Toy Story 3. It was unnecessary.
The group sat around the large table in the man cave, plates of food scattered in front of them. It had been a few days since Mrs. Jackson's unexpected arrival at Hero League headquarters, and things had been mostly quiet, too quiet. They knew Amy was out there, planning something, but for now, they were trying to enjoy a rare moment of peace.
Connor, you've lost it.
How can you defend that movie?
Before the debate can escalate further, the alarm system in the man cave suddenly goes off, the shrill sound cutting through the air and silencing the group immediately. Everyone looks toward the security console on the wall as the red warning lights flash.
Really, Mr. Rence? You couldn't even come out here alone. You need your little team to back you up like always.
Connor, man, you're killing me here!
Connor heads toward the monitor, types in the access code, and the camera feeds around the headquarters pop up on the screen. The group crowds around him, watching intently.
Mr. Rence, get out here. Face me. I'm done hiding in the shadows. It's time for you to pay for everything you've done.
On one of the outside cameras, they see her, Amy. She stands just outside the front gate of Hero League headquarters, pacing furiously. Her face is twisted in anger, and she is yelling something toward the security cameras. Even from the footage, they can see papers fluttering around her like a storm, controlled by her newfound powers. Connor adjusts the volume, and Amy's voice comes through the speakers, crackling with rage.
You think you've won? You think you're safe behind your walls? Get out here, Rence, and face me like a real hero. Or are you too scared to deal with the mess you've created?
She's completely lost it.
What do? We can't just let her stand out there ready to attack.
She's working with the Villain League now. This could be a trap.
Whatever this is, we're ready for it, but we don't play into her hands.
The group exchanges uneasy glances as Amy continues her rant, her voice filled with fury. They gather their gear, preparing to face Amy, knowing this confrontation is long overdue. As they move toward the exit, Mr. Rence glances at the camera feed once more, his determination growing.
Amy was out of control, and it was time to end this once and for all.
Really, Mr. Rence? You couldn't even come out here alone? You need your little team to back you up, like always.
This is my fight, Amy. But I'm not an idiot. You've got powers now, and you're dangerous, so yeah, I brought backup. But I'll face you one-on-one.
Are you sure about this?
Yeah, this is something I need to deal with. She's come here for me, and if I don't handle it, she won't stop. We've got your back if things go south. Just give us the signal.
It's about time you face me. I've been waiting for this. You think you can get away with everything you've done? The Uno rematch, the prison break, everything? No more games, Rence. This ends now.
You're still stuck on that Uno match? Amy, that was a long time ago. You've lost sight of what's important.
No, you don't get it. You and your team have been getting away with everything for too long, and now I finally have the power to make you pay.
The group emerges from the headquarters, the evening air crisp as they approach the front gate where Amy stands, her face twisted in anger. The fluttering papers around her, sharp and dangerous, seem to move with a life of their own, controlled entirely by her frustration and rage. As they step into view, Amy's expression shifts from determined fury to visible annoyance.
So, what's your big plan? Paper cuts?
Amy's eyes flare with rage, and with a sudden movement of her hand, she sends a flurry of paper blades flying straight at Rence. The edges of the papers are razor sharp, and they dart through the air with surprising speed, aimed to slice into him. But as the papers approach, Rence can't help it. He laughs.
Really, Amy? Paper?
You think this is a joke? You won't be laughing when I'm done with you.
But as the paper blades close in on him, Rence's body begins to shift, transforming before Amy's eyes. In a flash, he changes into a giant pair of scissors, his sharp blades glinting in the dim light.
What the...
Before the paper blades can strike, Rence, in his new form, effortlessly snips through them, sending harmless scraps of paper fluttering to the ground. The remaining papers swirl around him, but the sight of him as a pair of scissors is too much. His shape-shifting ability, combined with the absurdity of her attack, makes the whole thing almost comical. Rence, still in scissor form, gives a quick snip in Amy's direction, cutting through more of her paper blades as they fly toward him. He shifts back to his normal form, chuckling.
You might want to rethink your attack strategy, Amy.
Stop laughing at me. You think this is all a joke, don't you?
It's not that I don't take you seriously, Amy. It's just you're fighting with paper, and I'm literally a pair of scissors. You've got to admit, it's kind of funny.
Amy's fury reaches its peak, and she screams in frustration, sending another barrage of paper blades flying at Rence. This time, though, her attack is more erratic, fueled by her anger and humiliation. Rence steps forward, his voice softening a bit as he dodges the attacks.
Amy, this isn't the way. You don't need to go down this path. You're better than this.
You don't get it. I have to do this. I have to make you pay.
Amy, listen to yourself. You're destroying yourself over something that doesn't even matter anymore. There's still time to stop this.
But Amy isn't listening. She clenches her fists, the papers around her swirling wildly as she prepares another attack, her anger blinding her to reason. Behind him, Rence can sense his team watching, ready to jump in if things escalate further. He doesn't want it to come to that, but he knows Amy isn't going to stop unless something changes. As he readies himself for whatever comes next, he hopes there is still a way to reach her before it's too late.
You think you're so clever, Rence. You and your stupid team, always laughing, always acting like you're untouchable.
Amy, I'm trying to give you a chance. This doesn't have to be like this, but you're so focused on revenge that you're not seeing how ridiculous this is.
Shut up!
Amy sends another wave of paper blades flying toward him. Rence dodges them easily, but his patience is wearing thin.
Enough, you're not listening. Fine, have it your way.
Without warning, Rence's body begins to morph again, his form shifting rapidly. This time he doesn't become a pair of scissors. Instead, his body solidifies, becoming heavy and dense, and in a matter of moments he transforms into a giant boulder, smooth, massive, and utterly immovable.
What the hell is that supposed to do? You think a rock is going to stop me?
You need a little help, Rence?
Yeah, Zach, give me a roll.
Zach cracks his knuckles, his telekinesis kicking in as he focuses on the massive boulder that is now Mr. Rence.
All right, here we go.
With a small flick of his hand, Zach sends Rence rolling toward Amy's pile of papers. The enormous boulder slowly gains speed, rumbling across the ground. Amy's eyes widen as she realizes what is happening, but she is too stunned to act.
No, no, no.
But it is too late. Zach gives another telekinetic push, and the boulder rolls over Amy's carefully arranged papers, flattening them under its massive weight. The sharp, dangerous sheets crumple and tear as the boulder rolls over them, turning them into harmless scraps. Amy watches in horror as her entire attack is crushed in an instant. The papers that had once swirled menacingly around her are now nothing more than a pile of shredded remnants scattered across the ground. Her hands tremble, the power she had worked so hard to control suddenly useless. Rence, still in boulder form, rolls to a stop at the edge of the paper pile, and with a flash he shifts back into his human form. He dusts his hands off, glancing at the mess of papers at his feet.
Well, that takes care of that. Paper isn't exactly the strongest thing to throw at a rock, Amy.
You ruined everything. You always ruin everything.
Amy, you've gone too far. This isn't about me or the Hero League anymore. You're letting your anger destroy you, and it's not going to end well if you keep going like this.
Behind him, the rest of the Hero League watches in silence, ready to jump in if Amy makes another move, but it is clear that she is losing control of her own power and her purpose. The pile of shredded paper at her feet is all that remains of her plan, and it isn't enough to fight back.
I don't want to hurt you, Amy. This has to stop.
Amy stands frozen, staring at the destroyed remnants of her attack, her hands shaking. For a moment it seems like she might lash out again, but instead she slowly lowers her arms, her rage flickering out like a dying flame.
I just wanted to prove I was stronger than you. I wanted you to pay for everything.
You don't need to prove anything, Amy. This revenge isn't going to fix anything. It's only going to make things worse.
Amy stares at the ground, her shoulders slumping in defeat. The battle is over, and she knows it. Whatever power she had gained, whatever plans she had made, they had all fallen apart in the face of the truth. She had lost, and deep down she had known she would.
I didn't want to be the one who always lost.
It doesn't have to be this way, Amy. There's still a chance to turn things around, but you need to let this go.
Amy doesn't respond, her gaze still fixed on the ruined papers scattered at her feet. The fight has gone out of her, and for the first time she seems unsure of what to do next.